Agency join. Uh, try to call Professor Kundu. See if he can join.
So Kunu sir in train, he tell me that he will join in upper time news. Hello, hello.
Yeah, okay. Hello. That's okay. So we can start. So Sangeeta, so the number one item is the tie-up with another non-profit who has the implementation, correct? So I think the update I have received from Sun is that something has prepared the documentation, and I think something have you given this to Professor? Something?
Sir, I think you have a network issue. I can't.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Everyone can hear me?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, now you can hear me? Okay, Asya.
Yes, on off because it's very loud on my
Okay.
side.
Yes, yes. Okay. So I was telling that the tie-ups, the partnership that we are seeking with another organization, non-profit organization who has the required certificates, is in progress. I think Sun King has given the document to Professor Kundu to sign by the management of another organization. Is that correct, Sun King?
Yes, sir, I already complete all the documentation. Now need to sign by Shajalkar. Then I will give fully
Okay,
for
so when
sign.
you are planning to get it signed by?
Uh, Possibly tomorrow or next day.
Okay, and then after 4 only Professor Kundu will go to that town, right, to get it signed.
Yes, 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 sir.
Okay, so this is the update, Sangeeta. You have any question on this? Ah, yeah, yeah. So before election result, we are trying to finish our side. So everything is done. Only our director needs to sign, which Sun King get it done. Okay. Uh, okay. Second topic. Correct. Correct. That's the main thing pending. Okay. Second point you raised on the execution part, right? On Pulokda's part. So Pulokda has shifted his base to North Bengal, and he has been pretty busy. The reason I removed him from here because he's not getting time to join. So it looks bad if someone is in the group and not responding. So I removed him, but I am in touch with him. So in case he is doing any project, he can still do project in North Bengal, but not in South Bengal. Near Himalayas, he is now staying with his family. So if we need him for any project in Darjeeling, Siliguri, or near Himalayas, Sikkim, for any conservation project, for example, in Himalaya, then he can be a good help. But he cannot execute any project in Murshidabad or Calcutta or any other place except this Siliguri, Jalpaiguri, Sikkim, that area, Bhutan. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get it people. So in West Bengal at least, but other state I need to check. We need to hire or we need to think about other state. But West Bengal or South Bengal, I'm Hmm. Like Orissa, you can take care, right? Orissa, you have enough contact. Yeah. So I can take care. I can take care of Murcia. Wherever Srijan has branches, I can take care of those areas. Okay. No, no. I am not. I'm again going to Indonesia. I'm trying to get a project there. Okay. I'll discuss with you. Yeah. I'll discuss with you. Healthcare space. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. I'll discuss with you separately. Uh, yeah. So I think the reason things are pretty slow because of election in West Bengal state. So that is one of the reasons. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. So, okay. Now I can come to the third point, which is I we can ask Asia to help us to create a funding agencies list who specifically does this animal conservation project. So that would be her first task, the funding agencies on the conservation. It could be flora and fauna both. It could be animal, it could be any plant species or something, especially in Himalayan region or Eastern Indian region or mangrove forest in West Bengal. So she can do some research and come back with some international funding agencies who are sponsoring these conservation um, projects, right? Including tiger conservation in West Bengal, crocodile conservation, then
I have a question.
yes, Asia.
Is it located in India or the one that just funds projects in India?
It would be specifically for Eastern India, Himalayan region in Eastern India, or the coastal region of Eastern India, because that's where we are operationally based. We cannot execute in any other part yet. Maybe Central India, perhaps Central India, Sangita can confirm if we can do it in Central India. But as of ah yes, yes. Yeah, we can see your hand raised. Yeah. No. No, because we can discuss on this, but we need to start from somewhere, right? The reason that we had one interaction with this NGO, which we got selected, but then again not selected, right? Kind of right. So that is a good learning. So going for hmm, yeah, uh, mm. Yes, that can also be done. So Asya, we can send her an email. We need to give her inputs, right? Which region?
হ্যালো।
হ্যাঁ, আপনি একটু মিউট করে দিন। So what we can do? We can uh, Start with any theme: women empowerment or livelihood, or farmers, or migration, or labor migration, or animal conservation. Anything we can start, right? But for anything to start, we need information. So ASIA can help us to research on one of these themes. So we can start from any theme. The reason I was proposing to go with conservation projects first, because I see a lot of um, funding trend in this space, and not many NGOs do conservation. This is less competition. Most of the MFI, microfinance institutions, they do women empowerment, livelihood. Every state you go, you'll find hundreds of NGOs doing the same work. Almost every district they have society, trust, a lot of NGOs, but only few NGOs do animal conservation or conservation projects. Okay. Yes, so we have a partner organization with Professor Kundu only introduced me to that person. He works in Sundarban. You know Sundarban, right? Which is a mangrove forest where the tigers are there. So he does a lot of work with these farmers who collects honey from this forest, and they tigers and get killed and all. So he did a lot of work in that space. I think he also worked with Medha Patekar on this. He has a lot of practical experience working in forest for like not specifically tiger conservation, but maybe I'm not sure. Professor Kundu can um, explain on that, but we can get some practical help. If we have a project, then we can also have him as a consultant. He can help us to execute. If we get any conservation project in Sundarban area, we can just tie up with his organization and he can execute it. We can share the funding. Yeah. Mm. So Sangeeta, first thing first, I'm thinking to rebrand Srijan. Rebrand Srijan means we need to rebrand our website, our theme. Then we will have grassroots level organization partner network. So we may have hundreds of partners in different states, and we can get a project and we can pass on the project to our partner. We don't necessarily need to execute the project by ourselves. So that's the model I'm thinking. I'm open for discussion. You can you can also put your thoughts there. Hmm. No, that's on paper, because you can still hire people, same people as consultants. Yeah, we can hire them. Everything, payroll and everything on paper will be in our name. We can execute with the help of local partners. Yeah, that's fine. That's we can manage. You remember I tried the similar concept with microfinance with this good coin platform, where I tried to gather these NGOs, MFIs in a single digital platform. So similar way we can tie up with NGOs and execute the project. Yeah, yeah. So, mm, uh, okay, okay, okay. We can leave because I'm not very much convinced about the portfolio COVID. So yeah, so I don't want to get into that space. Yeah, I mean, now we can discuss about what we can do in terms of regions priorities. So if you ask Asia, Asia can start with livelihood funding agencies. Actually, livelihood can be linked with conservation. So in Sundarban, the project I am mentioning, they linked the honey collectors' livelihood with the conservation of tiger. Actually, the convergence.
So should I start with animal conservation projects, like fundings for them?
Yes, yes, sure. So, Asya, I will send you some specific details, like which geographical area. Okay, and then you can.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, anyone, anything else? I'm done from my side. I will coordinate with Asya, and Asya will come up with the funding agencies list, and then we start preparing the proposal and send. Okay, Sunny, note down this thing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think Professor Kundu is traveling, so maybe better we discuss maybe some other time. I can reach out individually to you, Sangeeta and Professor Kundu, before our next meeting. So maybe tomorrow or maybe after a couple of days, I'll reach out. Okay. Okay. So thanks all. And Sanking, please send the meeting minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thanks.
Out of this experience will arise leaders in business and industry who will profit by the example.
Project manager?
Yes, 15 years of experience.
Do you have any AI certifications?
No, but I'm a fast learner.
We'll be in touch.
I don't see any AI skills here. How do you plan to stay relevant?
Project manager? I'm sorry, the position was filled by someone with AI credentials.
Stop. Please stop using ChatGPT like it's Google. Get AI certified in 28 days and you won't recognize yourself.
So I'm over 42 and I just got AI certified in less than a month.
Mm-hmm.
One program changed everything. I didn't quit my job or spend thousands.
Example which Gandhi has set for the world, and they will apply to business the same tactics which he has used in building the greatest following known in the history of the world. These leaders will come from the rank and file of the unknown men, who now labor in the steel plants, the coal mines, the automobile factories, and in the small towns and cities of America. Business is due for a reform. Make no mistake about this. The methods of the past, based upon economic combinations of force and fear, will be supplanted by the better principles of faith and cooperation. Men who labor will receive more than daily wages. They will receive dividends from the business, the same as those who supply the capital for business. But first, they must give more to their employers and stop this bickering and bargaining by force at the expense of the public. They must earn the right to dividends. Moreover, And this is the most important thing of all. They will be led by leaders who will understand and apply the principles employed by Mahatma Gandhi. Only in this way may leaders get from their followers the spirit of full cooperation, which constitutes power in its highest and most enduring form. This stupendous machine age in which we live, and from which we are just emerging, has taken the soul out of men. Its leaders have driven men as though they were pieces of cold machinery. They were forced to do so by the employees who have bargained, at the expense of all concerned, to get and not to give. The watchword of the future will be human happiness and contentment. And when this state of mind shall have been attained, the production will take care of itself, more effectively than anything that has ever been accomplished, where men did not and could not mix faith and individual interest with their labor. Because of the need for faith and cooperation in operating business and industry, it will be both interesting and profitable to analyze an event which provides an excellent understanding of the method by which industrialists and businessmen accumulate great fortunes, by giving before they try to get. The event chosen for this illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was being formed. As you read the story, keep in mind these fundamental facts, and you will understand how ideas have been converted into huge fortunes. First, the huge United States Steel Corporation was born in the mind of Charles M. Schwab, in the form of an idea he created through his imagination. Second, he mixed faith with his idea. Third, he formulated a plan for the transformation of his idea into physical and financial reality. Fourth, he put his plan into action with his famous speech at the University Club. Fifth, he applied and followed through on his plan with persistence and backed it with firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you are one of those who have often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, this story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation will be enlightening. If you have any doubt that men can think and grow rich, this story should dispel that doubt, because you can plainly see in the story of the United States Steel the application of a major portion of the 13 principles described in this book. This astounding description of the power of an idea was dramatically told by John Lowell in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted. A pretty after-dinner speech for $1 billion. When, on the evening of December 12, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor to a young man from out of the West, not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American industrial history. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stuart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged the dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steelman to Eastern Banking Society. But they didn't expect him to stampede the convention. They warned him, in fact, that the bosoms within New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to oratory, and that, if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and Harrimans and Vanderbilts, he had better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go at that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab as became his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with his presence only briefly. And so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole affair was of so little moment that no mention of it found its way into print the next day. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what there was of it was restrained. Few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Monongahela, and none knew him well. But before the evening was over, they, and with them Money Master Morgan, were to be swept off their feet, and $1 billion baby, the United States Steel Corporation, was to be conceived. It is perhaps unfortunate, for the sake of history, that no record of Charlie Schwab's speech at the dinner was ever made. He repeated some parts of it at a later date during a similar meeting of Chicago bankers. And still later, when the government brought suit to dissolve the Steel Trust, he gave his own version, from the witness stand, of the remarks that stimulated Morgan into a frenzy of financial activity. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical, for the niceties of language never bothered Schwab, full of epigram and threaded with wit. But aside from that, it had a galvanic force and effect upon the 5 billions of estimated capital that was represented by the diners. After it was over, and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour more. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on, full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, or chewing gum combinations. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago's stock jobbers, who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it and failed. Elbert H. Gary, the sanctimonious country lawyer, wanted to foster it, but he wasn't big enough to be impressive. Until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial undertaking ever conceived, the project was regarded as a delirious dream of easy money crackpots. The financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition-crushing combinations had become operative in the steel world through the devices of that jovial business pirate, John W. Gates. Gates already had formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company. The National Tube and American Bridge Companies were two more Morgan concerns, and the Moore brothers had forsaken the match and cookie business to form the American Group, Tin Plate, Steel Hoop, Sheet Steel, and the National Steel Company. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle he had viewed, first with amusement and then with resentment, the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, he was content to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was that in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all. A plum pudding, as one writer said, without the plums. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference, though not the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world future for steel, of reorganization for efficiency, of specialization, of the scrapping of unsuccessful mills and concentration of effort on the flourishing properties, of economies in the ore traffic, of economies in overhead and administrative departments, of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purposes, he inferred, had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created, more uses for steel would be devised, and a goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, though he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of modern mass production. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business for Andra Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock tickers to fiddle around in anticipation of the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feast of reason Schwab had placed before him. When he had assured himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab and found that young man rather coy. Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found his trusted company president had been flirting with the Emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John W. Gates, the go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so, on the elder man's pressing invitation, Schwab went to New York and presented himself at the door of the financier's library. Now, certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of the drama, the stage was set by Andrew Carnegie, that the dinner to Schwab, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King were events arranged by the canny Scot. The truth is exactly the opposite. When Schwab was called in to consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men whom Andrew regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did take into the conference with him, in his own handwriting, 6 sheets of copper-plate figures, representing to his mind the physical worth and the potential earning capacity of every steel company he regarded as an essential star in the new metal firmament. 4 men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in the divine right of money. With him was his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, whom Morgan scorned as a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the processes of making and selling steel than any whole group of men then living. Throughout that conference, the Pittsburgher's figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and no more. He was insistent, too, upon including in the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even to satisfy the greed of friends who wanted to unload their companies upon the broad Morgan shoulders. Thus he left out, by design, a number of the larger concerns, upon which the walruses and carpenters of Wall Street had cast hungry eyes. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. "Do you think you can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell?" he asked. "I can try," said Schwab. "If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter," said Morgan. So far so good, but would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab thought about $320 million. What would he take payment in? Common or preferred stocks? Bonds? Cash? Nobody could raise $1/3 billion in cash. There was a golf game in January on the frost-cracking heath of the St. Andrews Links in Westchester, with Andrew bundled up in sweaters against the cold, and Charlie talking volubly, as usual, to keep his spirits up. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage nearby. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement in comfort, of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab, and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell for." The figure was approximately $400 million and was reached by taking the $320 million mentioned by Schwab as a basic figure and adding to it $80 million to represent the increased capital value over the previous 2 years. Later, on the deck of a transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said ruefully to Morgan, "I wish I had asked you for $100 million more." "If you had asked for it, you'd have gotten it," Morgan told him cheerfully. There was an uproar, of course. A British correspondent cabled that the foreign steel world was appalled by the gigantic combination. President Hadley of Yale declared that unless trusts were regulated, the country might expect an emperor in Washington within the next 25 years. But that able stock manipulator, Keene, went at his work of shoving the new stock at the public so vigorously that all the excess water, estimated by some at nearly $600 million, was absorbed in a twinkling. So Carnegie had his millions, and the Morgan Syndicate had $62 million for all its trouble, and all the boys from Gates to Gary had their millions. The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president of the new corporation and remained in control until 1903.
Niatresemme hydromatrix with polyglutamic acid. 100 hours hydration.
3. The dramatic story of big business, which you have just finished, was included in this book because it is a perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent. I imagine some readers will question the statement that a mere intangible desire can be converted into its physical equivalent. Doubtless some will say, "You cannot convert nothing into something." The answer is in the story of United States Steel. That giant organization was created in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that give it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into United States Steel. The steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it had been brought into legal existence were incidental, but careful analysis will disclose the fact that the appraised value of the properties acquired by the corporation increased in value by an estimate $600 million by the mere transaction which consolidated them under one management. In other words, Charles M. Schwab's idea, plus the faith with which he conveyed it to the minds of J.P. Morgan and the others, was marketed for a profit of approximately $600 million, not an insignificant sum for a single idea. What happened to some of the men who took their share of the millions of dollars of profit made by this transaction is a matter with which we are not now concerned. The important feature of the astounding achievement is that it serves as unquestionable evidence of the soundness of the philosophy described in this book, because this philosophy was the warp and the woof of the entire transaction. Moreover, the practicability of the philosophy has been established by the fact that the United States Steel Corporation prospered and became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employing thousands of people, developing new uses for steel, and opening new markets, thus proving that the $600 million in profit which the Schwab idea produced was earned. Riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitations. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask as your price for having passed this way. Remember also that the man who created the United States Steel Corporation was practically unknown at the time. He was merely Andrew Carnegie's Man Friday until he gave birth to his famous idea. After that, he quickly rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought. Chapter 4. Autosuggestion. The medium for influencing the subconscious mind. The third step toward riches. Autosuggestion is a term which applies to all suggestions and all self-administered stimuli which reach one's mind through the five senses. Stated in another way, autosuggestion is self-suggestion. It is the agency of communication between that part of the mind where conscious thought takes place and that which serves as the seat of action for the subconscious mind. Through the dominating thoughts which one permits to remain in the conscious mind, whether these thoughts be negative or positive is immaterial, the principle of autosuggestion voluntarily reaches the subconscious mind and influences it with these thoughts. No thought, whether it be negative or positive, can enter the subconscious mind without the aid of the principle of autosuggestion, with the exception of thoughts picked up from the ether. Stated differently, all sense impressions which are perceived through the five senses are stopped by the conscious thinking mind, and may be either passed on to the subconscious mind or rejected at will. The conscious faculty serves, therefore, as an outer guard to the approach of the subconscious. Nature has so built man that he has absolute control over the material which reaches his subconscious mind through his five senses, although this is not meant to be construed as a statement that man always exercises this control. In the great majority of instances, he does not exercise it, which explains why so many people go through life in poverty. Recall what has been said about the subconscious mind resembling a fertile garden spot in which weeds will grow in abundance if the seeds of more desirable crops are not sown therein. Autosuggestion is the agency of control through which an individual may voluntarily feed his subconscious mind on thoughts of a creative nature, or by neglect permit thoughts of a destructive nature to find their way into this rich garden of the mind. You were instructed, in the last of the 6 steps described in the chapter on desire, to read aloud twice a day the written statement of your desire for money, and to see and feel yourself already in possession of the money. By following these instructions, you communicate the object of your desire directly to your subconscious mind in a spirit of absolute faith. Through repetition of this procedure, you voluntarily create thought habits which are favorable to your efforts to transmute desire into its monetary equivalent.
Convert your audio and video files into accurate text transcripts in seconds with TurboScribe. Visit turboscribe.ai and click Start Transcribing for free to create your free account. Then simply drag and drop your files to upload. Choose from over 98 languages, click Transcribe, and TurboScribe will start transcribing right away. In moments, your transcript is ready, perfectly synced to the audio. Download in popular formats like PDF, Word, and SRT subtitles. Transcribe 3 files for free every day or upgrade for unlimited transcriptions. Visit turboscribe.ai and start transcribing for free.
Equivalent. Go back to these 6 steps described in Chapter 2 and read them again very carefully before you proceed further. Then, when you come to it, read very carefully the 4 instructions for the organization of your mastermind group, described in the chapter on organized planning. By comparing these 2 sets of instructions with that which has been stated on autosuggestion, you, of course, will see that the instructions involve the application of the principle of autosuggestion. Remember, therefore, when reading aloud the statement of your desire, through which you are endeavoring to develop a money consciousness, that the mere reading of the words is of no consequence, unless you mix emotion or feeling with your words. If you repeat 1,000,000 times the famous Emile
directionless, when you don't know what you are building, when the future feels unclear, then do this exercise, future self clarity. What is this exercise? You connect with a clearer version of yours in the future. And how do you do? So stand tall, body posture, and experience the quiet confidence. Somebody who you know has this, and that person already knows what is coming up and is in no hurry. Imbibe that personality within you. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, sense the person beside you very calm. Now imagine yourself 5 years ahead. Not perfect, just clearer. See where you are. Notice what you are doing. Feel how you feel. Stay there. Think of the place that you are right now. How does it feel? How does it look? Where are you? Are you standing? Are you walking? Are you with people? Are you in a stadium? Are you in a classroom? Are you in a seminar? Are you speaking? Are you in the boardroom? Are you taking decision? Don't rush. Allow yourself to be there and feel that completely. Now slowly stand tall. Physically, if possible. That would be the best posture if you have. Feel that posture, that you are not hiding, you are not couching, you are not just hiding, you are just there. You are there, irrespective of anybody and everybody around you. You are just holding space for yourself. You are being the space. Let that feel enter your body. Stay for a moment. Now that future confident, clearer self is inside you. Take that person completely in and be that person. Be in this situation very confidently, very calmly, very assuredly. Be that person yourself, because you are going to be that person shortly into the future, where you will be 5 years from now. Visualize that person. That person will not be your present person. Definitely that person has improved to another position, another space. Your future clarity already exists. You are just moving towards it.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are two words, just two, when whispered not to the world but into the silence of your own being. Reality begins to bend, doors open, coincidences rush in, delays dissolve. What you once called impossible starts calling your name. But here's the mystery. These two words are sacred. They are not meant to be shared, not with friends, not with family, not even with the mirror, because the moment you speak them out loud to someone who doesn't understand the language of the unseen, you weaken their power. Doubt creeps in, logic takes over, and the seed of your manifestation is stolen. You see, creation doesn't happen through effort. It happens through identity, through assumption, through becoming the state of what you desire before it shows up. And these two words, they are the gateway, a portal to the version of you who already has the thing you're chasing. You may think you're here for information. You're not. You're here for transformation. This isn't about a technique. It's about alignment. And alignment begins with the inner declaration, quiet, bold, and unshakable. So I urge you, don't just listen to this speech. Absorb it, feel it, become it. Because by the end of this message, you will not only know the words, but you'll know why they work, how to speak them into the fabric of your life, and what to do once everything starts shifting in your favor. Stay with me. You've been taught to speak in order to inform, to explain, to describe what is. But I'm here to awaken you to something much deeper, much holier, something that the ancients knew but the modern mind has forgotten. Words are not simply vessels of expression. They are the womb of your world. They are the invisible tools with which you sculpt your reality. You believe you are speaking words, but in truth they are speaking you into existence. Every sentence you utter, every phrase you repeat, every inner monologue you accept as casual thought, these are not empty vibrations passing through air. These are blueprints sent directly into the heart of creation. You may not see the effects instantly, but make no mistake, every word spoken in belief returns to you, not as echo, but as form, as people, as opportunity, as resistance, or as release. That is why it's not what you ask for that shapes your life. It's what you declare, what you inwardly accept as real. Now, listen very carefully, because this is where it all begins to shift. When I say declare, I do not mean with fanfare or performance. I mean a quiet knowing, a still, sacred inner voice that whispers reality into place, not because it wants to, but because it already sees it as done. The great tragedy is that most people speak their circumstances instead of their creation. They say, I am broke, I am tired, nothing ever works for me, no one listens. They think they're describing life, but they're prescribing it. These are not reflections, these are commands, orders to the unseen forces that obey only one master, belief clothed in word. Let that settle in your soul for a moment. You are always using this creative force. The only question is whether you are using it consciously or letting it use you unconsciously. The language of creation is not about complexity. It is not about eloquence or beauty or vocabulary. The language of creation is identity. The moment you say I am, you are invoking the most powerful phrase in the universe. You are defining the unseen substance of your being. I am is not followed by facts. It is followed by fate. Say it with fear, and fear follows. Say it with confidence, and the world reshapes itself to match. Say it with love, and love floods in. And yet most of us say I am and follow it with lack, with limitation, with disbelief. Not because we want to, because we were taught to. We were trained to be humble in all the wrong places. We were taught that boldness in speech is arrogance. But what we call arrogance, creation calls clarity. The universe does not care how loud you speak. It only listens to how certain you are. Let me give you an example. If a man stands in front of a mirror and says, I am successful, but his heart whispers, I am not, which one do you think will shape his life? The whisper. Every time. Because it is not the volume of your voice that creates. It is the intensity of your inner consent. This is why I say it's not enough to affirm. You must assume. You must speak the word and wear it like a skin. Live in it as though it were already true. You must think from the end, not toward it. Speak not as someone who desires, but as one who has already received. This is where most fail. They say, I am wealthy, and then look at their bank account for evidence. They say, I am loved, and wait for a text to prove it. But creation doesn't work that way. It doesn't follow proof. It produces proof. Your words do not respond to the world responds to your words. So now I ask you, what are you saying when no one is listening? What are you whispering to yourself when the lights are off? That is the prayer being answered. That is the frequency you are living on. Your outer world is just a printout of your inner speech. The events you call life are just the echoes of yesterday's beliefs. And now you know. Now you are awake. You will no longer say, this is just the way things are. You will say, this is the way I've imagined them to be. And you'll begin to listen, to really listen, to the words you casually mutter. You'll catch yourself in the middle of a complaint and turn it into a command. You'll rise from victim to visionary simply by shifting the way you speak. You'll say, I am able, and watch as ability meets you. You'll say, I am chosen, and circumstances will bend to highlight your favor. You'll say, I am whole, and healing will begin, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped speaking against it. This is the divine code. It's hidden in plain sight. The sacred texts of every tradition speak it in symbols. The mystics live by it in silence. The prophets proclaimed it with fire in their bones. And yet here you are, hearing it anew, not with your ears, but with your soul. Because something within you already knows this. You felt it in the quiet moments, in the déjà vu, in the flashes of clarity that vanish before you can explain them. You've always known your words held weight. You just forgot that they were bricks in the house you're living in. So stop waiting for the world to tell you what's possible. Start telling the world what is. I am is your permission slip. I am is your access point. It is the beginning of every miracle and the root of every breakthrough. Let the world say what it wants. Let logic argue. Let doubt rise. You hold to the word. Speak it in secret. Guard it with reverence. Repeat it until your bones believe. And when your body still feels tired, say, I am renewed. When your bank account looks dry, say, I am overflowing. When no one claps for you, say, I am celebrated. Because eventually the outer must mirror the inner. It has no choice. Creation isn't optional. It's law. And your words, they are the lawmaker. Speak them wisely. Speak them deliberately. Speak them in love. Because you are not here to describe life. You are here to declare it. And yet as you begin to declare, as you dare to claim the I am, you will notice something strange, an urge to share it, to explain it, to speak it into the ears of others, so that they might see your transformation and believe in it with you. But I must tell you with all the urgency of truth, do not. What is sacred must remain hidden, not because it is fragile, but because it is formless. And form takes shape best in silence. When you plant a seed into the earth, you do not pull it up each day to check if it's growing. You trust the mystery of dark soil. You let the unseen do its perfect work. Likewise, when you speak your creative word, when you say I am and attach it to the reality you choose to live in, you must seal it inside yourself like a sacred vow. Speak it inwardly, consistently, with unwavering faith, but share it with no one, not because others are evil or unworthy, but because they live in the logic of the seen, and you are speaking from the authority of the unseen. When you tell someone your declaration, especially one that has not yet taken visible form, they begin to reflect it through the lens of their own doubts, limitations, and fears. They look at your current results, not your inner shift, and without meaning to, they try to correct you back into their version of reality. Their words won't sound cruel. They may even sound caring. But make no mistake, every seed of doubt they plant becomes a delay in your manifestation. You do not need external approval for an inner truth. That is the trap. That is the noise. That is the delay. Because the moment you utter your desire into the ears of one who does not live by faith, you invite analysis. And analysis is the enemy of assumption. It begins to pull your declared word out of the womb of the subconscious, placing it back in the courtroom of reason. And what lives in reason must obey logic. But what lives in the unseen, what lives in spirit, is not subject to logic. It is subject to belief. Protect the early form of your vision as a mother protects a child in her womb. It doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be nourished in thought, in feeling, in stillness. It needs to be kept away from the friction of disbelief, the erosion of criticism, and the chill of intellectual doubt. You may say, but I want support. I want someone to believe with me. And I tell you now, your own belief is more than enough. It is not a group vote. Creation is not democracy, it is decree. In the early stages of manifestation, silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. When you are gestating a new reality, speak less, not just to others, but even to yourself. Let your declaration be brief but bold, I am. Let the feeling carry more weight than the words. Let the assumption become so normal, so familiar, that you no longer feel the need to announce it. Because true power never explains itself. It simply is. When you walk in the knowing of a fulfilled desire, your need to prove it vanishes. You do not need to convince anyone of what you already are. The rose does not ask permission to bloom. It simply opens in season. Likewise, your word, kept sacred, will blossom in its appointed hour without your needing to justify it. And here's what's miraculous. When you stop announcing your dreams, they begin arriving faster. Not because the dream changed, but because your energy stopped leaking into the world of opinion. You are no longer dividing your creative power between imagining and explaining. You are letting it gather, condense, focus. And when that happens, when your word becomes your atmosphere, reality bends, quietly, certainly, powerfully. So don't feel pressured to reveal your inner work to outer eyes. Don't advertise what's being woven in secret. Let your transformation speak through results, not announcements. Let the shift happen so deeply that when the world finally sees it, they say, when did this happen? And all you will do is smile, because you will know it happened the moment you said, in silence I am, and told no one. You see, if you've made a silent declaration about who you are, one so sacred and potent that it must remain unspoken to the world, it brings us to a brutal but essential truth. Who you believe you are will determine everything. That's not just poetic, and it's certainly not some esoteric abstraction. It's practical, it's psychological, it's foundational. Let me put it plainly. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. If you say I am, and you follow that phrase with something weak, something bitter, something that reflects your current struggle instead of your intended strength, then you're not speaking the future into existence. You're reinforcing the present prison, and you're doing it with conviction, with energy, with identity. Human beings are wired in a very particular way. You act in accordance with what you identify as. That's why these two words, I am, are so deeply in the psyche. They're not casual. They begin to shape the lens through which you perceive the world, and more importantly, through which the world responds to you. This is why people sabotage their own growth, because they're trying to achieve something without becoming the type of person who naturally achieves it. It's not enough to hope for wealth while still identifying as someone who's always scraping by. It's not enough to desire love while clinging to the belief that you're unlovable. That contradiction creates a split inside of you, a psychological war, and it paralyzes you. Do you know how many people live stuck in that contradiction? Thousands, millions, maybe more. They say they want to change, but every word they speak confirms the identity of the person they were yesterday. And the body listens, the brain listens, the world listens. You can't lie to yourself and expect real change. The unconscious mind, the core of who you are, doesn't respond to lies. It responds to belief that has been rehearsed into reality. So if you want to manifest anything at all, you must first become the version of yourself who already has it. You must speak from that place, think from that place, behave as though it were already true, not in a delusional way, but in a strategic, courageous, focused way. This is where the hard work comes in, not the outer hustle, but the inner shift, the daily recalibration of your identity. You need to ask yourself, who am I being today? Do my thoughts match the future I claim I want? Are my habits aligned with the kind of person I say I am? It's tough, and it's sobering, because most people want the result without the reconstruction. They want the fruit without growing the root. But reality doesn't work like that. Your identity is like a thermostat. You might spike in behavior, try something new, set a goal, declare a dream, but if your internal identity hasn't changed, you'll snap back to where that thermostat is set. It's inevitable. That's why people who win the lottery usually lose it all. That's why people who suddenly fall in love often sabotage it, because the identity didn't match the blessing, and so the blessing gets rejected, whether consciously or not. So what do? You change the setting. You raise the standard. You stop saying, I'll become that someday, and start saying, that's who I am now. And the moment you say it, not performatively, but sincerely, deeply, it starts to become true. You act differently. You speak differently. You see differently. Let me be brutally clear about something. This shift in identity is not comfortable. It will feel like lying at first. It will feel unnatural. But that's because you've spent so many years rehearsing a limited version of yourself. Of course, truth feels foreign if you've been loyal to falsehood for a lifetime. But that's no excuse to stay small. You're not meant to simply survive your story. You're meant to rewrite it. And that starts with the two words that define your character arc before the world ever sees the ending, I am. Not I wish, not I might, not I hope, but I am. This is where personal responsibility begins, and personal power is born. What you're about to discover could rewrite your entire reality. And the strange thing is, once you start to speak those words, I am, from a place of deep conviction, once you begin to embody a new identity, instead of begging for a new outcome, something else happens, something subtle, almost invisible, but incredibly profound. The world begins to shape itself around your assumption, and your imagination becomes the soil from which your future grows. That's not metaphor, that's reality. You might think imagination is reserved for children or artists or storytellers, but that's dangerously naive. Every single person is imagining something all the time, and more often than not, it's unconscious. They're imagining rejection before it happens, failure before they even begin, conflict before the words are spoken, and because of that, their life becomes an exact mirror of the worst-case scenarios they've rehearsed 1,000 times in their own minds. The imagination is not optional. It's not a toy. It's the womb of your experience. If you imagine consistently from the place of the person you used to be, you will remain that person, regardless of what affirmations you recite, what goals you set, or what external efforts you take. And so, this becomes the critical task. You must take control of what you imagine. This is where discipline meets vision. Imagination, when used intentionally, becomes your greatest tool, not for escape, but for embodiment, for becoming. So let's look at this carefully. If you want to shift your identity, if you want your words, those powerful declarations of I am, to stick, to take root in the subconscious and bear fruit in your life, you need to do more than say them. You need to see them. You need to feel them. And not as distant possibilities, but as present realities. Your imagination must begin to operate from the place you want to be, not toward it. That's the difference. Most people imagine forward. They look at their current circumstances, they look at the mountain ahead, and then they say, someday I'll get there. But that mindset traps them in the very reality they're trying to escape. Because as long as something is imagined in the future, it is not believed in the present. And what isn't believed now has no power to manifest. So what's the alternative? You imagine backwards. You place yourself mentally in the future, in the state already fulfilled, and then you look back from there with the confidence of someone who's already arrived. You say, of course this happened. I've lived it 1,000 times in my mind. And then something inside of you shifts. The fear begins to evaporate. The doubts lose their voice. Because you've made the future familiar, and what's familiar is no longer frightening. Now, this isn't fantasy, this isn't delusion, this is responsible creation. You have to remember that the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's vividly imagined. If you feed it an image long enough, especially one that's emotionally charged and repeated, it begins to organize your behavior consciously and unconsciously to make that image come true. And here's the key, this only works when you're consistent. When you're disciplined enough to stop returning to the version of yourself who doubts, who hesitates, who flinches. You must learn to live in the scene you've imagined day after day, regardless of what your senses tell you. That's the price of transformation, because there will be resistance. You'll be tempted to check the mirror, to look at the numbers, to ask for reassurance. But the mirror can only reflect the previous state of consciousness, not the one you've just stepped into. The world is slow to catch up, but it always does. The question is, will you hold the vision long enough for it to catch you? If you fold too early, if you abandon the imagined reality because the outer world hasn't yet conformed, then you've trained your mind to believe that only the visible is real. And in doing so, you sever the link between imagination and manifestation. But if you persist, if you stay in the inner movie long enough for the world to change its script, you'll witness a shift so staggering, so undeniable, that it feels like coincidence or even fate. But it's not. It's structure. It's cause and effect. It's the direct outcome of deliberate, disciplined inner vision. That's the real power of imagination. It's not fantasy, it's rehearsal. And your life, whether you like it or not, is the performance. Now, once you've rehearsed the inner vision with enough precision, once your imagination becomes the space you live in, rather than just something you visit occasionally when the world gets too loud, something incredible begins to happen. You'll notice a shift in your perception, a kind of internal recalibration where you stop reacting to life as though you're trapped inside it and start responding as though you've stepped outside of it. And in that space, in that moment, you begin to experience something that most people never even realize is possible, a shift in consciousness. It's not just a new thought. It's not just a better habit. It's an actual shift in the dimension of identity you occupy, and it's terrifying. Because to move from who you were to who you're becoming requires leaving behind everything that felt solid, even if it was miserable. That's the irony of transformation. People say they want change, but they cling to their familiar misery because it feels safe. But once you start stepping into this new space, not by force, but through repetition, through declaration, through imagining from the end, your consciousness begins to take on the texture of the life you've imagined. You stop trying to achieve the new life and you start inhabiting it. That's what creates the real results. This isn't magic. It's structure, it's order, and it's built on a foundation of assumption. Assumption isn't wishful thinking. It's a kind of inner posture. It's the decision to walk, speak, think, and act from a state that hasn't yet shown up on your calendar, your bank statement, or your relationship history, but that already exists in the field of potential. And that field is real, more real than what you're experiencing right now. Because what you're living today is just a delayed reflection of what you previously accepted as true. So the critical question becomes, what state are you assuming now? Not occasionally, not when you're inspired, but habitually, unconsciously, reflexively. Because that assumption is doing more to shape your future than any plan or checklist you've put on your vision board. If you assume lack, you'll manifest lack, regardless of how many opportunities are presented to you. If you assume rejection, you'll interpret every silence as proof that you're unwanted. If you assume powerlessness, then even in moments of strength, you'll second-guess yourself back into weakness. Your assumption is the lens, and the lens controls what you see, how you interpret it, and how you act upon it. People often ask, how do I change my life? The better question is, how do I change what I assume about myself and the world? Because you can't change what you keep assuming to be true. You'll just keep returning to it like gravity. And this is where responsibility comes into play. Brutal, uncomfortable, liberating responsibility. You are not responsible for everything that's happened to you, but you are responsible for what you assume about yourself in response to it. That's the line between victimhood and authority. That's where sovereignty begins. So, How do you assume something new? You practice. You stop waiting for evidence. You stop measuring your worth by external confirmation, and you start rehearsing the internal alignment with such commitment that reality eventually has no choice but to follow suit. You sit with the new version of yourself in silence. You imagine how they speak. You practice how they walk into a room, how they handle conflict, how they respond to doubt, how they invest their time. And then you start living from that, not all at once, but steadily, relentlessly. And it's uncomfortable because you're going to feel like a fraud. You're going to feel disoriented. But that's good. That means your old identity is being disrupted. That's the necessary chaos before the restructuring begins. And if you can hold the assumption long enough, despite the evidence to the contrary, despite the discomfort, despite the pull to regress, you'll eventually feel it settle inside of you. You'll no longer be reaching for a future self. You'll be standing in it. Because assumption, when sustained, becomes identity. And identity, when embodied, reshapes everything. And once that identity settles, once the new assumption hardens into a quiet certainty, you face a final, often overlooked challenge. It isn't about effort now. It isn't about vision. It's about protection. You have to protect the seed. You've spent so much time speaking the new words, imagining from the end, assuming the state of the person you're becoming. And now, just like a sprout pushing up through the soil, your new identity is vulnerable. And if you're not careful, you'll let the weeds of old habits and opinions choke it out before it ever gets the chance to bear fruit. That's the part no one tells you. Everyone's excited to plant the seed. Everyone wants the outcome. But very few are willing to stand guard while it's still fragile, while it hasn't yet bloomed, while there's no applause, no results, no external proof to justify the inner change. And this is where the test begins. Because right when you're doing the right thing, declaring I am, assuming the outcome, seeing you're not close, it comes when you're finally aligned. It comes when you're just beginning to walk like the person you claim to be. You'll be tempted to say something careless, something like, maybe this isn't working, or what if I was wrong? And those statements, those little compromises, are not harmless. They're cracks in the foundation you've been building. See, your words don't just build things, they also undo them. The moment you speak against what you've declared, even as a joke, even out of frustration, you're undoing the inner structure. You're sending mixed signals to your subconscious. You're giving it permission to return to what it previously knew, your old limitations. You can't afford that. Not now. Not after everything you've done. So you must become a kind of guardian, a watchman over your inner world. You have to get militant about your language, both internal and external, not in a way that becomes neurotic or controlling, but in a way that reflects respect for the power you now carry. That means no leaking your vision to people who don't believe in it. No entertaining conversations that reduce you back to an older, smaller version of yourself. No passive self-deprecation. You protect the word you planted the same way a skilled craftsman protects his design before it's finished, with boundaries, with focus, with silence. Because the world will try to pull you back, not out of cruelty, sometimes even out of love. People who knew the older version of you will resist the new one. Not because they hate you, because your change challenges their assumptions. And this is when you have to decide, am I going to protect the seed, or am I going to give it away for approval? That's the core of it. Do you want confirmation from others, or do you want results because you don't get both? Not at this stage. There will be a period where no one understands what you're doing. They'll say you've changed, that you're being distant, that you think you're better. Let them say it. Let them misunderstand you. You're not living for their narrative anymore. You're living from the truth you chose. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. Of course it is. Growth often is. But loneliness is not emptiness. It's space. And space is exactly what your new identity needs to expand. So be deliberate with who you allow near your vision. Be ruthless about what you consume, what voices you listen to, what ideas you rehearse, If it doesn't build the version of you you're becoming, it doesn't belong in your mind. You protect the seed not because it's weak, but because it's becoming. And anything becoming must be shielded from forces that would rather it stay buried. So you speak less, you listen more. You walk quietly but with conviction. And every time the doubt comes knocking, and it will, you remind yourself you've already spoken the word. You've imagined the end. You've assumed the identity. Now, all that remains is to guard the growth. Thank you.
Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe deeply, gently, as if you had all the time in the world, because you do. For time is merely the unfolding of what you already are. And if you truly understood what you are, what you've always been, you would stop striving, you would stop struggling. You would relax, you would lean back into the loving arms of the infinite and allow all things to be drawn to you by the silent currents of assumption. There is a secret most people will never understand. They live by effort. They believe that if they do not push, strive, fight, they will have nothing. They believe manifestation is a matter of force, of will, of grinding action. But this is not how creation occurs. It never has been. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything you desire was first imagined. It was felt before it was seen, and it was received not through struggle, but through surrender. Let me tell you something marvelous. You are the operant power. You are not at the mercy of the world. The world is at the mercy of your inner conversations, your assumptions, your imaginal acts. But here's the key. The law does not work through anxiety, through pressure, through desperation. It works through faith, ease, stillness. Relaxation is not passivity. It is power. To relax is to trust the unseen. To relax is to believe that it is done. When you lie back in the chair of imagination and close your eyes, you are entering the throne room of God. And who is God? God is your own wonderful human imagination. That which you dare to assume to be true, if persisted in, must come to pass. You need not beg the universe. You need not chase it. You only need to rest in the awareness of your desire fulfilled. Now you may ask, if I do nothing, how can things change? And I tell you, you are never doing nothing. Even when you are still, you are imagining. And what you imagine, you become. What you accept, you receive. So the question is not whether you are manifesting. The question is, what are you imagining when you think no one is watching? What are you accepting as real? If you can sit quietly and accept the reality of your desire, you are performing the greatest act of creation. For creation is finished. Every possibility already exists. You do not have to create the reality. You merely align yourself with it. You occupy it inwardly. You make it your dwelling place. You close your eyes and feel the truth of it so deeply that it becomes more real to you than what your senses report. Let us say you wish to be wealthy. Most will go into frantic action. They will worry about opportunities, about connections, about the market, about effort. But you, if you know the law, you will go within. You will sit silently and assume the feeling of being wealthy. You will hear friends congratulate you. You will feel the texture of a life of abundance. You will walk in that state internally until it becomes natural. And then, without strain, the outer world will bend to your assumption. You do not need to fight against what is. You only need to ignore it. The present facts are not the truth. They are simply echoes of past assumptions. The law of assumption is not interested in the facts. It is only interested in your inner state. Relax. Let go. You are not bound by appearances unless you choose to be. You are free the moment you believe you are. When I say relax, I do not mean to become indifferent. I mean to become confident. You do not need to be concerned with how it will come to pass. That is the universe's concern, not yours. Your only task is to dwell in the state of the wish fulfilled. And the more you relax, the more you trust, the more swiftly the universe will rearrange itself to deliver that which belongs to you by right of consciousness. The one who is anxious is doubting. The one who is striving is unsure. But the one who knows can rest. Imagine a pregnant woman. She does not strain to grow the child. She does not force it into being. She knows it is there. She knows it will come. And so she lives her days in quiet confidence. That is the way of true manifestation. Imagination is the womb of the universe. Whatever you impregnate it with, it will bear. But if you plant a seed and then dig it up every day to check if it has grown, you are operating in fear. Relaxation is the evidence of faith. When you truly believe it is done, you stop questioning. You stop looking. You rest. And yet, some will say, but nothing has changed. And I say everything has changed. Because you have changed. And the world cannot help but reflect that change. Do not concern yourself with the time lag. It is only the echo catching up to your vibration. If you persist in the feeling, in the assumption, in the knowing, it must come. It is law. And the law does not fail. Remember this, everything comes from within. There is no one to change but self. If you would change your world, you must first change your concept of self. But how do you change it? Not by force, but by assumption. If you desire to be loved, assume you are already adored. If you desire to be successful, assume the feeling of triumph. Relax into that feeling. Let it soak into your bones, and then walk as though it were already true. You are not becoming anything, you are awakening to what already is. The state exists, the wealth exists, the love exists, the health exists, but you cannot receive it if you are tense, worried, striving. You must become still enough to hear it. You must become soft enough to receive it. The hand clenched in effort cannot hold the gift. Only the open palm of trust can. People believe they must earn their desires. But your desires are not rewards. They are revelations. They are signs of what is already yours. The moment you desire a thing, it exists. Your job is to claim it. And how do you claim it? By feeling it, by imagining it, by relaxing into it so completely that you forget it was ever a desire. It becomes your natural state. That is what I mean when I say relax and let the universe manifest anything for you. The universe is not something apart from you. It is your deeper self. It is the infinite intelligence that moves through you. When you rest in faith, you open the gates. When you rest in the assumption of the wish fulfilled, you invite all of heaven to flood your life. But I must warn you, this path is not for the impatient. It is not for the frantic. It is for the one who dares to believe in the invisible, the one who chooses inner stillness over outer noise, the one who walks by faith, not by sight. That is the one who receives. Let others race and chase. Let others fight and fear. But you be still. Close your eyes and assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Let the senses fall away. Let the noise of the world dim. In that stillness imagine. In that silence feel. In that peace receive. The universe is not a machine. It is a mirror. It does not respond to effort. It responds to identity. Who you are being in your imagination is what determines what you experience in your world. If you assume lack, you will see lack. If you assume abundance, abundance will flow. But to assume, you must relax. You must withdraw attention from what is and give it to what will be. And so I